Though he claimed lack of conscience, Elric's tormented eyes belied the claim as he sat at his window, drinking strong wine and thinking on the past. Since the sack of Imrier, he had quested the world, seeking some purpose to his existence, some meaning to his life. He had failed to find the answer in the dead god's book. He had failed to love Sharila, the wingless woman of Mirren, failed to forget Cimmeril, who still inhabited his nightmares, and there were memories of other dreams, of a fate he dare not think upon. Peace, he thought, was all he sought, yet even peace in death was denied him. It was in this mood that he continued to brood, until his reverie was broken by a soft scratching at the door. Immediately his expression hardened. His crimson eyes took on a guarded look. His shoulders lifted so that when he stood up, he was all cool arrogance. He placed the cup on the table and said lightly, "Enter." A woman entered, swathed in a dark red cloak, unrecognizable in the gloom of the room. She closed the door behind her and stood there, motionless and unspeaking. When at length she spoke, her voice was almost hesitant, though there was some irony in it too. "You sit in darkness, Lord Elric. I had thought to find you asleep." "Sleep, madam, is an occupation that bores me most, but I will light a torch if you find the darkness unattractive." He went to the table and removed the cover from a small bowl of charcoal which lay there. He reached for a thin wooden spill, placed one end in the bowl, blowing gently. Soon the charcoal glowed and the taper caught, and he touched it to a reed torch that hung in a bracket on the wall above the table. The torch flared and sent shadows skipping around the small chamber. The woman drew back her cowl, and the light caught her dark, heavy features and the masses of black hair which framed them. She contrasted strongly with the slender, aesthetic albino who stood a head taller, looking at her impassively. She was unused to impassive looks, and the novelty pleased her. "You sent for me, Lord Elric, and you see I am here." She made a mock curtsy. "Queen Yashana." He acknowledged the curtsy with a slight bow. Now that she confronted him, she sensed his power, a power that perhaps attracted even more strongly than her own, and yet he gave no hint that he responded to her. She reflected that a situation she had expected to be interesting might ironically become frustrating. Even this amused her. Elric in turn was intrigued by this woman in spite of himself. His jaded emotions hinted that Yashana might restore their edge. This excited him and perturbed him at once. He relaxed a little and shrugged. "I have heard of you, Queen Yashana, in the other lands, other than Jakor. Sit down if you wish." He indicated a bench and seated himself on the edge of the bed. "You are more courteous than your summons suggested." She smiled as she sat down, crossed her legs and folded her arms in front of her. "Does this mean that you will listen to a proposition I have?" He smiled back. It was a rare smile for him, a little grim, but without the usual bitterness. "I think so." "You are an unusual woman, Queen Yashana. Indeed, I would suspect that you had Melnibonean blood if I did not know better." "Not all your young kingdom upstarts are quite as unsophisticated as you believe, my lord." "Perhaps. Well, now that I see you at last face to face, I find your dark legend a little hard to credit in parts. And yet, on the other hand," she put her head on one side and regarded him frankly, "it would seem that the legends speak of a less subtle man than the one I see before me." "That is the way with legends." "Ah," she whispered, "what a force we could be together, you and I." "Speculation of that sort irritates me, Queen Yashana. What is your purpose in coming here?" "Oh, very well. I did not expect you to listen even." "I'll listen, but expect nothing more." "Then listen. I think the story will be appreciated, even by you." Elric listened, and, as Yashana had suspected, the tales she told began to catch his interest. Several months ago, Yashana told Elric, peasants in the Garavian kingdom of Jakor began to talk of some mysterious riders who were carrying off young men and women from the villages. Suspecting bandits, Yashana had sent a detachment of her white leopards, Jakor's finest fighting men, to the province to put down the brigands. None of the white leopards had returned. A second expedition had found no trace of them, but in a valley close to the town of Thakora, they had come upon a strange citadel. Descriptions of the citadel were confused. Suspecting that the white leopards had attacked and been defeated, the officer in charge had used discretion, left a few men to watch the citadel, report anything they saw, and returned at once to Dakos. One thing was certain, the citadel had not been in the valley a few months before. Yashana and Thaleb Ka'ana had led a large force to the valley. The men left behind had disappeared, but as soon as he saw the citadel, Thaleb Ka'ana had warned Yashana not to attack. It was a marvellous sight, Lord Elric, Yashana continued. The citadel scintillated with shining rainbow colours that were constantly altering, changing. The whole building looked unreal. Sometimes it stood out sharply. Sometimes it seemed misty, as if about to vanish. Thaleb Ka'ana said its nature was sorcerous, and we did not doubt him. Something from the realm of chaos, he said. That seemed likely. She got up. She spread her hands. We're not used to large-scale manifestations of sorcery in these parts. Thaleb Ka'ana was familiar enough with sorcery. He comes from the city of screaming statues on Pantang, and such things are seen frequently. But even he was taken aback. So you withdrew, Elric prompted impatiently. We were about to. In fact, Thaleb Ka'ana and myself were already riding back at the head of the army when the music came. It was sweet, beautiful, unearthly, painful. Thaleb Ka'ana shouted to me to ride as swiftly as I could away from it. I dallied, attracted by the music, but he slapped the rump of my horse and we rode, fast as dragons in flight, away from there. Those nearest us also escaped, but we saw the rest turn and move back towards the citadel, drawn by the music. Nearly 200 men went back, and vanished. What did you do then? Elric asked as Yashana crossed the floor and sat down beside him. He moved to give her more room. Thaleb Ka'ana was trying to investigate the nature of the citadel, its purpose and its controller. So far his divinations have told him little more than he guessed, that the realm of chaos has sent the citadel to the realm of earth and is slowly extending its range. More and more of our young men and women are being abducted by the minions of chaos. And these minions? Yashana had moved a little closer, and this time Elric did not move away. None who has sought to stop them has succeeded, and few have lived. And what do you seek of me? Help. She looked closely into his face and reached out a hand to touch him. You have knowledge of both chaos and law, old knowledge, instinctive knowledge if Thaleb Ka'ana is right. Why, your very gods are lords of chaos. Well, that is exactly true, Yashana, and because our patron gods are of chaos, it is not in my interest to fight against any one of them. Now he moved towards her, and he was smiling, looking into her eyes. Suddenly he took her in his arms. Perhaps you will be strong enough, he said enigmatically, just before their lips met. And as for the other matter, we can discuss that later. In the deep greenness of a dark mirror, Thaleb Ka'ana saw something of the scene in Elric's room, and he glowered impotently. He tugged at his beard as the scene faded for the 10th time in a minute. None of his mutterings could restore it. He sat back in his chair of serpent skulls and planned vengeance. That vengeance could take time maturing, he decided, for if Elric could be useful in the matter of the Citadel, there was no point in destroying him yet.